Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my astrology podcast. Today, we are discussing a concept that I think really helps us learn about all of the planets and the signs, what they're after, and what they're doing in a birth chart. So, the concept is called Essential Dignities. Basically, this is an ancient system of categorizing where the planets do very well and have additional strength. Now, the planets are going to be placed in one of the 12 zodiac signs. And so today we're going to go through each of the planets and what signs they're really strong in. Then on the next episode, we're going to talk about essential debilities or looking at where planets struggle more to express their will. So, there are two types of essential dignities I want to focus on today. And those dignities are called domiciles and exaltations. So, a domicile is when a planet is placed in a sign that it rules. So, for example, the sun rules Leo. So, the sun is domicile in the sign of Leo. Domicile planets have this quality of being at home. You can think of this almost as how you are in your own house, right? You're comfortable there, hopefully. You want to chill out. You have expectations about how it runs. You know how to clean it. You know how to take care of it. It's sort of a no-brainer when we're at home, right? So similarly, planets that are domicile have very natural, innate expressions in the signs that they're in and thus that they rule. Now, an exalted planet is when a planet is in a sign that it gets elevation in. So it gets a real boost of that quality in this sign. In exalted planets, I like to say these are like planets who are going to a very fancy hotel, or they're going to the rich aunt's house and they're being a bit spoiled, right? They're being given a lot of privileges. And this, of course, can make these planets very big in a person's life, very expressed. But they can also create some issues around wanting to maintain those privileges, having issues when those privileges aren't around. Similarly, domicile planets, because they're strong in these signs, can struggle to go outside the comfort zone, can struggle to sort of have their expectations disrupted. And therefore, both domiciles and exaltations, while they're dignities, they can also have debilitative effects in a person's life if we're not conscious of them. So, we're going to walk through each of the planets and talk about these dignities, starting with the sun. So, the sun is domicile in Leo. Now, this makes the sun in Leo and Leo placements just in general quite easy when it comes to being seen, quite easy when it comes to expressing their identities. The sun is about our life expression, our life purpose, what we strive to become in life. Now, what's funny is that when the sun is domicile, it's not really striving, right? Just like the sun rises, it's just glowing. So Leo people have this image of who they want to become, but it's not like they feel like they need to cross the mountain to get it. They already are it in their own heads. And sometimes this doesn't reflect in real life, right? So Leo people can get a bit carried away with, well, I'm already special. I'm already the sun. I already exude a lot of light and people love me. Now, this lends itself to natural charisma, self-confidence, and ability to take up space without apology, but it can also create a little bit of entitlement, which Leos are notorious for, and just demanding that people see them. Okay. So once again, the sun is domicile in Leo, but where it's exalted, interestingly enough, is in the sign of Aries. So Aries is also a fire sign. So it has that focus on expression, on life force, on life purpose, on putting itself out there into the world. But Aries is also ruled by the planet Mars. And Mars is how we strive to become what it is that we want to be. And so I think that one of the reasons the sun is exalted in Aries is because Mars is there fighting to express its energy. It's fighting to fulfill its purpose and to become all it knows it can be. While the Leo expression of the sun is a lot more chill. It's a lot more sort of just expecting good things to come. And Aries, meanwhile, is striving to become everything it wants to be. So, what I've heard said about Leo versus Aries in terms of the dignity scheme is that Leo is born the king and stays the king. But Aries is the warrior who fights to earn the status of king. And so in the Aries sun or Aries archetype, generally we are seeing people who are quite competitive, right? Who are determined to securing that throne in society. While, the Leo is very similarly about taking up space and being seen, but they do it in a way that's a lot more just like chill and natural and not as seeking actively as the Aries is. Although Leos can still be seeking it, they just might not do it in very active ways. It might be more in just, that mental sphere of, dreaming and wanting. While Aries leaves that realm to go and get what it wants. Okay. So moving on to the moon. So the moon is domicile in Cancer. So the moon is all about getting us what we need, physically and emotionally. So Cancer moons are pretty good at fulfilling their own needs, right? Like they know what they need, they know their emotional cycles. These people are very emotionally in touch. But one of the issues of having moon in Cancer or Cancer placements in general is there can just be this, Cancer was called the queen in the ancient world. And so there can be this queen energy of just like, well, I expect my needs to be met. I expect, everyone to know what's going on internally with me all the time. Can't people see that I'm hungry? Can't people see that I'm needy, right? Can't people see that I'm, not doing great without, my special cup of tea and my fireplace on and, the weekend off from family troubles? I mean, Cancer moons and Cancer in general can just really know what they need, but also get quite annoyed when they're not getting what they need. Now, the moon is exalted in Taurus. Okay, so the Taurus moon or the Taurus person in general, very similar to Cancer, also has needs, right? They also need to feel comfortable. And something I noticed with the exaltation of the moon in Taurus is that these people can have like luxury needs. Like the Cancer moon, it's kind of your basic everyday needs, but the Taurus moon can need like nicer than average things, right? Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is about beauty and pleasure and aesthetics. So also what Taurus moons are after might not necessarily be always physical comfort, but aesthetic comfort. Like they need the beauty and, the realm of the arts and, really good food, really fine museums and experiences that make them feel at home in the world. So in both archetypes, we're dealing with needs, the nature of needs. And when those needs aren't met, man, you can count on both of these signs to really let you have it, to really let you know. You know, Moon's about emotion. So these two signs can get very emotional. I don't think we talk about that enough with Taurus, actually, being the exaltation of the moon, that it is actually very moody and very needy. Think about it. It needs that physical comfort around it all the time. It needs to feel nourished, it needs to feel full. And so when it doesn't have that, you'll be hearing from the Taurus or Taurus moon. Okay, so Mercury is our next planet we're going to talk about. Mercury is domicile in Gemini and Virgo because Gemini and Virgo not only are ruled by Mercury, but they're also doing Mercury things, right? That's part of why the rulership's assigned. Gemini and Virgo are both about collecting information, about knowing how a thing works, about studying that thing, and creating connections in the world. Now, Mercury is exalted in Virgo. And I think the reason that Mercury has chosen its exaltation to be in Virgo is because Virgo carries all the mental capacities of Gemini, but because it is an earth sign, it is able to apply what it has learned in practical settings. So Gemini is an air sign. So yes, Gemini is very good at absorbing information, communicating that, making friends with people through a great conversation. Virgo, however, can do that too because it's ruled by Mercury, but it can also, walk the talk. Geminis are sort of notorious, right, for just being able to talk the talk and, maybe they don't really fulfill their plans or, they tell a good story, but the story was maybe not fully true, right? Or they say they're going to do something and they get everyone really excited and then it just fades out. So Virgo has the follow through because of that earth element, right? Virgo has that ability to actually put its ideas into the ground and watch things grow from it. Not that Gemini doesn't, but archetypally, we're dealing with an air version of Mercury, which is Gemini, and an earth version, which is Virgo. So that's why I think that the exaltation personally occurs there. Okay. We are now going to talk about Venus. So Venus is a domicile in Taurus and Libra, and it is exalted in Pisces. So, Venus in Taurus and Libra, as well as these archetypes just in general, they are very natural. They find it very easy to connect, right? To connect with the earth because, Taurus is an earth sign, Libra more so the air sides of life. Very easy to connect with other people. But Venus is all about connection and it's about pleasure and it's just about generally feeling good and seeking out the romance in everyday life. Now, the reason I think it gets exalted in Pisces is because Pisces is one of the signs that's also ruled by what ancient astrologers called benefics. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter and Venus are both known as benefics, right? Or good doers. And the fact that Pisces has the rulership of Jupiter, which is the greater benefic, right? Jupiter's the greater benefic. That's why it brings out this smaller benefic of Venus. Pisceans are such, optimistic people. They are lovers of art and music and beauty and nature. They're lovers of love, right? They give a lot in love. So Venus and Pisces have a lot to do with each other. As you can see, right, Jupiter really like lifts Venus up in Pisces. It makes that Venus sensation larger than life. Pisceans can really be all consumed with beauty and fantasy and love and romance. And in the modern astrological community, Pisces gets the rulership of Neptune, which also deals with illusions and glamour and things that are larger than life and all-encompassing and feel divine. So Pisces is really that expression of the divine. Venus being in Pisces will seek that divine and will carry that divine forth. And one of the issues with Venus, just in general, especially when it's exalted or when it's domicile, is that Venus can be really focused on the good and it can struggle a bit with the bad, right? It can struggle a bit with the shadow. And so, domicile Venus in Taurus and Libra, it knows how to have a good time. It seeks the good naturally. And Pisces, seeks the good tenfold. It's, very about positive thinking and looking towards, what is going to work out. It's about solutions, right? But sometimes this can cost these people, this ability to hold space for the darkness, to hold space for what's not always that easy. So That's what's really interesting as you go through the essential dignities is you see that, each planet's quality is really brought out by its dignity, and you learn what the highlights as well as the shadows of that planet are. So Venus, right, has these shadows and highlights that we're talking about. And so does every single planet, and they really get highlighted through their, once again, zodiacal dignity. Okay, so moving on to the planet Mars. Mars is about motivation, right? It's about bursts of energy. It's about sexuality. It's about aggression. It is our divine masculine impulse to create. And so Mars is domicile in Aries and Scorpio, and it's exalted in Capricorn. Okay. So, what I like to make of this is that Aries and Scorpio, I think, find it easy to take action. Especially Aries. Aries can just have these quick bursts of energy, which are really inspiring and really creative, but sometimes Aries can struggle a bit with the follow through. Scorpio is a fixed sign, right? So, it has a little bit more staying power in its actions, in its motives. But the reason I think Mars, this planet of quick energy and motivation, is exalted in Capricorn is because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Saturn is about longevity, while Mars is about more spur of the moment, inspiration, creative power. It can also be motivation, consistently throughout our life if Mars or Aries or Scorpio is very prominently featured in the chart. Um, but I think that Mars does really well in Capricorn because Capricorn is able to take that action on Saturn's terms, slowly, deliberately, not trying to rush through anything, and also is able to really sustain that vision over time. Capricorn also has that earth modality to it. And if you think about Aries and Scorpio, they are fire and they are water. Fire and water tend to be, right, a lot more unpredictable in their actions. Mars, once again, also kind of has that quality because action and motivation and drive, these things can be kind of they can be very startling. They can be very surprising and upsetting to the order of things. But because Capricorn is an earth sign, it's like we're grounding that Mars energy into a long-term plan. So Mars and Capricorn or Capricorn placements in general don't have really a problem taking it at their own speed and really focusing their action into something long-term and sustainable. Okay, we have come to Jupiter, right? So Jupiter is about faith and it's about optimism and it's about our beliefs and our ability to kind of tune into the universe and expand as it expands. So it can also relate to themes like intuition and spirituality. So it is domicile in Sagittarius and Pisces, which means that these signs and Jupiter in these signs has a very natural faith, optimism, intuition, connection to spirituality. And Jupiter finds its exaltation in the sign of Cancer. Okay. Which I find to be really because Cancer is about the emotions and it's about feeling safe. We all need to feel safe, to feel regulated, to feel a sense of home in order to expand in the ways Jupiter wants us to, right? So Cancer is like you can imagine this home or this dwelling or this church space. And within that dwelling, we get to fully let go. We get to fully surrender. We feel safe there, right? And it's only when we're surrendered that divine guidance, universal intelligence can really work through us. And so I think that this is why we get an exaltation. We get a prominence, we get an elevation of the Jupiter quality in Cancer because Cancer, if it feels safe, right, can surrender it all, can be very spiritual, can let in this higher guidance. You know what's also interesting is that in a lot of ancient texts, Cancer and the moon were attributed to the soul's arrival on Earth. And because Jupiter has this spiritual quality, this quality of kind of remembering the bigger picture, I feel like Cancer in the moon are sort of the birth of the spirit on Earth. They're the birth of the soul into the body, right? Moon type things, body holding spirit. And so within the Cancer archetype, there can be this longing, this yearning, this remembering of the bigger picture, of the Big Bang, of the cosmos, of, whatever you want to call it, that kind of spiritual home place. And Jupiter being in Cancer really helps us remember that. While, Sagittarius and Pisces, it might be a little bit more ephemeral, what they're expanding, what they're learning. Sagittarius, it can give us a lot of knowledge on things. Pisces can give us a lot of appreciation and wonder for things, but Cancer, the exaltation of Jupiter, can give us a little bit more of that like broad spiritual picture of where we really are at home in the universe. Okay, we've arrived at our last planetary archetype that's included in this dignity scheme. The outer planets are not in the dignity scheme, unfortunately, because they did not exist in the ancient world that developed this system. But focusing now on Saturn. So Saturn is domicile in Capricorn and Aquarius, and it's exalted in Libra. So I find this super curious because, Saturn wants restraint, it wants the long term prioritized, it wants us to go slowly, and it also wants us to sort of detach from getting our way. It wants us to just sort of accept fate, right? It's a very stoic energy. And so Capricorn and Aquarius sort of naturally have this, right? They're naturally able to do Saturn things. They can restrain, they can detach, they can go slow. They don't necessarily need it to go their way, right? Extremely different to the moon and sun, which would be the opposite of Saturn, which need it to go their way, or they're very disappointed. But Saturn is exalted, doing very well in Libra. And I really like to bring an imagery for this one because Libra is the scales, right? So it's balancing between different outcomes. It has a lot to do with justice. And the justice system, both in material terms and metaphysical terms, right, is always taking time and directing time and shaping time. So Saturn in Libra, I think, has this ability to really move time in the direction of justice, to take the most just path. Because Libra's an air sign, it's also objectivity and our awareness of the broader picture. So there is something here about being objective, about being observant, about being able to let justice play out as it will, and to also choose justice, to see justice. Because Saturn being, right, father time, don't they say, that, justice eventually always comes in time, or the moral arc of the universe, as MLK Jr. said, bends towards justice. So I feel like with Saturn and Libra in general, there's an ability to just see what is fair in the long run and what's not fair in the short term, and to also trust, because there is an element of trust we get in Saturn that we very rarely talk about, but to trust that justice will eventually come, that we will eventually get where we want to go. And we'll talk about this in the next episode on dignities and debilities. But Libra is the fall of the sun. So if the sun is all about standing out and being seen and sort of getting eyes on us, getting our expression out into the world, Libras are a little bit more okay with not having, immediate gratification. They can wait. They can be in the long term of things. They can trust and really easily embody that Saturn instinct of, this is just the way it is for now, but it will get better. So, that, my friends, is an overview of the essential dignities. So to recap, we talked about domiciles, we talked about, home signs and planets, and then we talked about exaltations, where planets are, really elevated or they're going towards, the ultimate expression of that sign. And hopefully through this overview of the dignities, you gleaned sort of what each planet is trying to do, how well a sign can help it do that, right? And then what are some of the consequences of doing a thing very well? Because the dignities, just like anything in astrology, anything in life, are not without their shadows. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, this podcast today, please give the podcast a review. It would help so much get the word out and really promote it to a whole community that I would love to build around this podcast and astrology in general. You can find me on Instagram at e.b.paisley or on TikTok at Ethan B. Paisley. And on both those pages, I have links to book a reading with me. I will also leave that link to my website, ethan-paisley.com, in the description below. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I hope to see you on the next episode.